My daughter came home sobbing because her teacher threw away the lunch I packed, and when I finally learned why, the truth shattered everything I believed. Stick with me while I share my story, and if it touches you, don't forget to support our channel by hitting that subscribe button, dropping a like, and sharing it with the people you care about. My name is Emily Carter. I'm a single mom working long shifts as a nurse in a small suburban town in Ohio. Life isn't perfect, but I do everything I can for my 7-year-old daughter, Lily. She's a quiet, gentle kid, the kind who holds her backpack tight when she gets nervous and hides half her smile behind her hands. Ever since her dad left years ago, it has just been the two of us, and we've built our own little world together. For the most part, our town feels peaceful. Everyone knows everyone. Kids ride their bikes in the street, neighbors wave from their porches, and the school Lily goes to is supposed to be one of the better ones. That's why I never imagined anything could be wrong inside her classroom. I trusted that she was safe. I trusted the adults around her. I trusted her teacher, Mrs. Donovan, a woman known for being strict but fair, or so everyone liked to say. But over the last few weeks, something started to shift. Lily didn't run up to me after school the way she used to. Instead of telling me about her day, she would mumble a few words and quickly ask if we could go home. She pushed her dinner around her plate, said she wasn't hungry, and she would stare at her lunchbox in the mornings like it made her uncomfortable. Little things at first, but small changes in a child speak loudly when you're a parent. I tried asking her gently what was going on, but she always shook her head and said everything was fine. Her voice was soft, but her eyes told a different story. I could see she was scared. I just didn't know of what. I started waking up at night worrying about her. Did she have trouble with other kids? Was she being left out? Was someone being mean to her? I didn't want to push too hard and make her shut down even more, so I waited and watched, hoping she would open up on her own. Every morning I packed her lunch with a little note inside, something simple like "Have a good day" or "I'm proud of you." I thought maybe it would remind her she wasn't alone. I hoped it would make her smile, but even that didn't seem to help. She grew quieter, her shoulders slumped more each day, and she avoided eye contact when I asked about school. It felt like she was slowly slipping away from me, inch by inch. I told myself maybe it was just a phase, maybe she was just tired, maybe school was overwhelming. But deep down, a mother always knows when something is wrong. I could feel it tightening in my chest every time I watched her walk through those school doors. What I didn't know then was that Lily wasn't losing confidence on her own. Something, or someone, was taking it from her. And soon, I would learn exactly who that person was, and why my daughter had come home crying that day. The first real sign came one morning when I placed Lily's lunchbox on the table, the same way I always did. Normally she would zip it up and put it in her backpack without a word, but that day she just stared at it. Her little hand stayed in her lap, and she didn't reach for it at all. When I asked what was wrong, she whispered that she didn't want to take lunch anymore. It caught me off guard because she had always loved the meals I packed. I thought maybe she wasn't feeling well or maybe she was tired, so I didn't push. I told her she could decide later, but she kept her eyes on the floor and barely said anything the rest of the morning. That afternoon, when she came home, I checked her backpack like I always did. Her lunchbox was still full. Nothing was touched, not even the small snack she always liked. When I asked her if she ate at school, she quietly said she wasn't hungry. It didn't make sense. Kids don't just skip meals without a reason. The next day and the day after that, the same thing happened. Full lunches came home untouched. Her stomach growled when she sat at the table, but she still insisted she wasn't hungry at school. I tried to sit down with her and talk gently, hoping she would open up. When I asked if something bad happened in the cafeteria or if someone was bothering her, her eyes filled with tears. She turned her face away and wiped her cheek quickly like she didn't want me to see. I told her she could tell me anything, that she didn't have to be scared, but she only shook her head and cried harder. Her silence scared me more than anything she could have said. It wasn't normal for her to hold things in like this. She had always been shy, but she wasn't secretive. Something was hurting her, but but she was too afraid to talk about it. I started paying closer attention. She moved slower in the mornings, dragging her feet as if she didn't want to walk through those school doors. She asked if I could pick her up earlier, even though I couldn't because of my work schedule. She clung to me for a few extra seconds before letting go, her arms tighter around my waist than usual. All these small things added up, and they didn't feel like simple childhood moods. They felt like fear. A few days later, while I was organizing laundry, I got a call from another parent in her class, a woman named Karen whose son, Alex, sometimes played with Lily. She didn't sound casual at all. She asked if everything was okay with Lily because her son came home saying something odd about their classroom. When I pressed her to explain, she hesitated, saying she wasn't sure if it was true or if kids were exaggerating, but she thought I should know that some children were being treated differently by their teacher. My chest tightened immediately. Treated differently? I asked what she meant, but she said she didn't want to say anything wrong and suggested I check in on Lily more closely. The call was short, but it left me shaken. Kids don't make up stories like that without reason. Combined with Lily's refusal to eat and her sudden fear of school, everything felt connected. For the first time, I felt a sharp, heavy worry settle in. Something was happening in that classroom, and whatever it was hurting my daughter. That morning I woke up a little earlier than usual because I wanted to make something special for Lily. She had been so quiet lately, and I thought maybe her favorite homemade lunch would bring her a bit of comfort. I packed everything carefully, the small sandwich she loved, the apple slices she always asked for, and the little cookie I saved just for her. I even slipped in a note that said, "I love you. Have a good day." When I handed her the lunchbox, she held it for a second like she wasn't sure she should take it, but she didn't refuse. She just nodded and walked toward the door with slow steps. All day at work, something in my chest felt tight. I kept thinking about the call I got from the other parent and the fear I'd seen in Lily's eyes. I tried to focus on my patients, but my mind kept drifting back to her. I hoped maybe today would be better, maybe the special lunch would make her feel safe again. But the moment she stepped off the school bus that afternoon, I knew something was terribly wrong. She wasn't just crying, she was shaking. Her little hands were curled into fists, her face red, and tears streamed down her cheeks like she couldn't catch her breath. She ran straight into my arms, clinging to me like she didn't want to let go. I picked up her backpack, expecting it to be heavy like always because she never touched her food. But this time it was light, too light. When I asked her what happened, she tried to speak but sobs kept cutting her words. I guided her inside, sat with her on the couch, and held her until she finally managed to get the words out. She told me that when she opened her lunch, Mrs. Donovan walked up to her desk, took the lunchbox out of her hands, and threw everything in the trash. Not quietly. Not in private. She did it in front of the whole class. Lily's voice broke as she said the other kids stared at her, some even laughed because they didn't understand what was happening. She said she felt embarrassed and small, like she did something wrong even though she didn't. Hearing that made something inside me crack. I tried to keep my face calm for her sake, but my stomach twisted so hard it hurt. I asked her why the teacher did that, but she only shook her head and said she didn't know. Her stomach was empty because she'd been too scared to ask for anything else at school. I pulled her close again, rubbing her back while she cried into my shirt. Every instinct in me was shouting that this had gone far beyond something small. This wasn't a misunderstanding or a simple mistake. Someone had humiliated my child on purpose. As soon as she quieted down enough to rest, I stood up and took a long, steady breath. My hands were shaking, but my mind was clear. I wasn't going to let this go. I wasn't going to let anyone make my daughter feel afraid to eat, afraid to speak, or afraid to be herself. No matter what it took, I was going to find out exactly why this happened, and I was going to make sure it never happened again. That night, after Lily finally calmed down a little, I gently tried to talk to her again. I didn't rush her or push her. I just sat beside her on the bed and waited until she looked up at me. Her eyes were swollen from crying, and she kept twisting the edge of her blanket in her hands. I told her she didn't have to be scared anymore and that whatever she said, I would believe her. For a moment she hesitated, like she was deciding if she should stay quiet or finally speak. Then she whispered something that made my whole body go cold. She said this wasn't the first time it had happened. Her voice trembled as she told me that her lunches had been thrown away again and again for weeks. She said every time she opened her lunchbox, Mrs. Donovan would appear beside her desk, grab it, and dump the food into the trash. Not once, not twice, many times. Lily said she stopped telling me because she thought I would be upset with her or think she did something wrong. I felt my heart drop. I asked her why she didn't tell me earlier. She wiped her cheeks and said that every time it happened, Mrs. Donovan would lean down and whisper, "Kids like you should learn discipline." Lily repeated those words slowly, and hearing them from her small, shaky voice made something inside me collapse. I didn't understand what kids like you was supposed to mean, but it sounded cruel, targeted, and completely out of line for any adult to say to a child. In that moment, guilt hit me so hard I could barely breathe. I had been packing her lunches with love, thinking she was eating them, thinking she was okay, while she had been sitting in a classroom, hungry and humiliated. I should have noticed earlier. I should have known something was wrong before it reached this point. At the same time, confusion and anger rushed through me. Why would a teacher do this? What reason could she possibly have for treating a child like this? Nothing made sense, and the more Lily talked, the more my anger grew. I held her for a long time, promising her that it wasn't her fault, that she didn't deserve any of it, and that I would fix this. She laid her head on my shoulder, exhausted, like she had finally shared a heavy secret she'd been carrying alone. When she fell asleep, I stayed there for a while, watching her small face relax, but my mind was far from calm. By the time I walked out of her room, my decision was already made. Whatever was happening in that classroom had gone far beyond simple mistakes or misunderstandings. It wasn't something I could ignore or hope would stop on its own. I took out my phone, opened the school directory, and found the number for the administration office. My hands were still shaking when I called, but my voice was steady. I told them I needed a meeting as soon as possible, and I didn't care how busy they were. This wasn't something that could wait another day. I was done trying to guess what was going on. I was done hoping things would change on their own. Someone had hurt my child, and now I was going to make sure the truth came out, no matter what. The next morning, I walked into the school office with a tight feeling in my chest. I had barely slept, and every step down the hallway felt heavier than the last. The secretary told me the principal was expecting me, and she led me to a small meeting room. When I walked in, the principal, Mr. Harris, was sitting at the table, and beside him was Mrs. Donovan. The moment I saw her, my stomach twisted. She sat stiffly, hands folded, acting as if she had nothing to hide. I took a seat, trying to keep my voice steady even though my anger was boiling just under the surface. Mr. Harris greeted me politely, but he couldn't even look directly at me. It was clear from the start that something was off. Before he could finish his opening sentence, I told them why I was there. I explained what Lily had told me, how her lunches were thrown away multiple times, how she cried every day, how she was humiliated in front of her classmates. Mrs. Donovan didn't flinch. Instead, she said Lily's lunch had been unsafe. She repeated that word like it explained everything. I asked her what she meant by unsafe, but she didn't give any real answer. She said things like not appropriate for a child or not up to school standards, yet she couldn't name a single item that was supposedly the problem. I knew exactly what I packed. Fresh food. Simple snacks. Nothing that could ever put a child in danger. Her calmness felt forced, like she had rehearsed her lines. And every time I asked for details, she looked directly at me with a cold, flat expression. It wasn't just unprofessional, it felt personal. The principal, on the other hand, looked like he desperately wanted the meeting to end. He shifted in his chair, cleared his throat, and kept glancing at the door. Anytime I asked a question, he would look down at the table instead of answering. When I asked if they documented the lunch incidents, he said he wasn't aware of any reports. When I asked why no one contacted me if they believed the food was unsafe, he mumbled something about oversight. His answers didn't match anything Lily told me, and his discomfort only made things feel worse. The more they talked, the more the inconsistencies piled up. Mrs. Donovan claimed she only threw one lunch away. Lily said it happened multiple times. The principal claimed he had no idea. Another parent had warned me something strange was happening. Nothing added up. It felt like everyone in that room was trying to cover something, trying to twist the story into something that made Lily look wrong and the teacher look blameless. I leaned forward and told them I wasn't leaving without clear answers. I demanded to see the classroom policies regarding food. If there were rules about what kids could bring, I wanted proof. I also asked for records of past complaints against Mrs. Donovan. At first, Mr. Harris tried to brush it off, saying everything was handled internally. But I refused to back down. I told them I deserved to know what was happening to my child. I told them Lily had been terrified to speak because of how she was treated. I told them I wasn't accepting vague excuses or shifting blame. If this school claimed to protect children, then someone needed to start acting like it. The room went silent. Mrs. Donovan stared at me with a tight jaw, and the principal finally looked up, his face pale. He said he would gather the documents I requested, but his voice sounded weak, like he knew those papers wouldn't protect them. Walking out of that meeting, I didn't have all the answers, but I knew one thing for sure: there was more going on than they wanted to admit, and I wasn't even close to finished digging. Later that evening, after the long and frustrating meeting at the school, I sat at the kitchen table replaying every moment in my mind. Lily was resting on the couch, still tired from all the crying she had done the day before. I kept looking at her small face and thinking about how easily adults could hurt a child without feeling even a shred of guilt. While I was going through my thoughts, my phone buzzed. It was a message from a number I didn't recognize. Normally, I wouldn't open something from a stranger, but something told me to check it. When I did, the message made me sit up straight. It was from a cafeteria worker at Lily's school. She told me she didn't want to get involved at first, but after hearing about what happened at the meeting, she felt she had to speak up. She said she saw everything. She had watched the lunches being thrown away more than once. She said she wasn't allowed to interfere in classroom matters, but she always felt sick to her stomach every time she saw it happen. My heart was pounding as I read her words. I asked her why Mrs. Donovan would do such a thing. What she replied with shocked me so deeply I had to read it twice. She said Mrs. Donovan wasn't doing it because of safety. She wasn't doing it because there was anything wrong with the food. She was doing it out of jealousy and resentment. According to the worker, Mrs. Donovan often complained in the staff room about certain kids. She said Lily was on that list. She claimed Mrs. Donovan kept saying things like kids of single mothers always get sympathy and they act like they need special treatment. The worker said the teacher seemed annoyed whenever Lily got a small note or a cute lunch. She said it looked like it bothered her that a little girl could still be happy even if her home life wasn't perfect. Reading those words felt like someone had punched me in the chest. I stared at the screen, unable to move. I couldn't believe that an adult, a teacher responsible for shaping children, would hurt a child out of something as petty as jealousy. The idea that she judged Lily because I was a single mother made my blood boil. Lily never asked for special treatment. She never complained. She never made trouble. She was punished simply for being loved by me. I asked the cafeteria worker if she would be willing to speak to the school administration or give a statement. She hesitated, saying she needed time to think because she was afraid of losing her job. She told me she would try, but she wanted to stay anonymous for now. Even with her fear, she still reached out to me, and that meant everything. It meant someone finally confirmed what my instincts had been screaming from the start. I thanked her sincerely and promised her I wouldn't mention her name. After the message ended, I sat there for several minutes, gripping the edge of the table. My hands were shaking from anger and heartbreak. I had been willing to give the school the benefit of the doubt. I had been willing to believe there was a misunderstanding. But now everything was clear. my daughter wasn't hurt by accident. She wasn't treated unfairly because of policy. She was targeted. And the woman who was supposed to protect her was the one causing all the pain. The anger inside me wasn't just frustration anymore, it was something sharper, something stronger. No one had the right to treat Lily this way. No one had the right to judge her for something she had no control over. If the school wouldn't protect her, then I would. And I knew this was only the beginning of uncovering the truth. After learning the truth from the cafeteria worker, I knew I couldn't just let things go. This wasn't about a single incident anymore, it was about protecting Lily and making sure no other child had to go through what she did. I decided I had to act, but I also knew I had to be careful. Rushing in without proof could backfire, and I wanted results, not empty apologies. The first thing I did was start documenting everything. I went through Lily's school calendar, marking the days she came home with untouched lunches. I wrote down every word she had said about the incidents, every detail she could remember. I even included what she wore, how she acted, and how she described her classmates' reactions. Each entry became a small but important piece of evidence. Next, I reached out to other parents whose children were in Mrs. Donovan's class. I explained the situation carefully, without accusing anyone, and asked if they had noticed anything unusual. Many parents hesitated at first, but a few shared stories of lunches being thrown away or their children being embarrassed in class for minor reasons. Some admitted they hadn't realized how serious it was until I explained it. Slowly, a pattern emerged. It wasn't just Lily, other kids were affected too. I also made sure to talk to staff I could trust. The cafeteria worker who had reached out to me agreed to share more details anonymously. She described dates, specific lunches, and even some comments Mrs. Donovan had made about certain children. I gathered these accounts carefully, making sure to record them accurately without exaggeration. Each statement added weight to what Lily had told me. Even some of the children were willing to talk. I asked them simple, gentle questions about what happened in class and how they felt. Their words were short, hesitant, and honest. Some said they were scared, others said they didn't understand why certain kids were treated differently. I wrote down everything, careful not to influence their answers. Their voices, though small, painted a clear picture. With all this information, I began preparing a formal complaint. But I knew a written report alone wouldn't solve the problem. I wanted real accountability, not just someone moving the teacher to another class. I organized the statements chronologically, highlighted recurring patterns, and documented the emotional impact on the children. I added my own observations as a parent, describing how Lily's confidence had been affected and how she had been forced into silence out of fear. Every note I wrote, every statement I collected, strengthened my resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a lunch or a single day, I was fighting for justice for my daughter and for the other children who were too afraid to speak. I knew it wouldn't be easy, but I was determined. This time, I wouldn't leave until the truth was acknowledged, and someone was held responsible for what had been done. Lily deserved that, and I wasn't stopping until she got it. The day of the board meeting, I arrived early, my heart pounding in my chest. I carried a folder stuffed with all the statements, notes, and evidence I had collected over the past weeks. Lily stayed close to me, holding my hand tightly, and I tried to give her a reassuring smile even though I felt nervous myself. This was the moment everything had been leading up to, the moment where the truth had to be heard. As the meeting began, I handed my folder to the board members and began presenting the evidence. I explained each incident carefully, pointing out the dates, the children involved, and the repeated actions of Mrs. Donovan. I stayed calm, letting the facts speak for themselves, even as my hands shook slightly. I could see Mrs. Donovan sitting across the table, her face tight, her eyes darting nervously as if she knew the walls were closing in. She tried to defend herself immediately, twisting the story as she had before. She said the children were exaggerating, claimed she only acted out of discipline, and repeated her old lines about unsafe lunches. But this time, the room wasn't silent with doubt, it was filled with proof. The testimonies from the other parents, the cafeteria worker, and even the children themselves were like a hammer striking her carefully constructed narrative. One by one, the statements contradicted every excuse she made. She faltered, her words slowing, her confidence clearly shaken. Then the cafeteria worker stood up to speak. Her voice was strong, and she laid out everything she had seen, the lunches thrown away, the remarks Mrs. Donovan had made, and the fear she had caused among the children. She didn't hide anything, and even though she requested anonymity, the impact of her words filled the room. Parents gasped, whispering to each other as they realized how long this had been happening behind their backs. The shock and disbelief were written all over their faces. Finally, it was Lily's turn. I knelt beside her as the board called her forward. She looked tiny, trembling, her small hands clutching mine for courage. But when she spoke, her words were clear and brave. She told the board exactly what had happened, repeating the phrases Mrs. Donovan had said and describing how it made her feel. Her voice shook at first, but the strength in her honesty grew with every sentence. She described the fear, the embarrassment, and the pain of being singled out, and the room fell silent, hanging on her every word. I watched Mrs. Donovan's face as Lily spoke. The mask of control she had worn for weeks cracked completely. Her jaw tightened, her eyes darted nervously around the room, and I could see the recognition that the truth she had tried to hide was now exposed for everyone to see. Her reputation, carefully maintained as a strict but competent teacher, began to collapse right there in front of us. For the first time in weeks, I felt a flicker of relief. The truth was out, and the power of Lily's voice, combined with the evidence we had gathered, had changed everything. This confrontation was only the beginning, but it was the moment where the injustice could no longer hide in silence. A few days after the board meeting, I received a call from the school. Mrs. Donovan had been suspended immediately, pending a full investigation. Hearing those words lifted a weight I hadn't realized I was carrying. Finally, there was action, and someone who had hurt my daughter would be held accountable. It felt like a small victory, but it was a start. After the suspension, other parents began coming forward. One by one, they shared stories of lunches being thrown away, humiliating comments, and children being singled out in ways they hadn't noticed before. It became clear that Lily wasn't the only child who had suffered, and the extent of Mrs. Donovan's actions shocked everyone. It was heartbreaking to see how many children had been affected, but knowing that we were finally being heard gave me hope that change was coming. The principal, Mr. Harris, called me personally to apologize. He admitted that the school had failed to notice the signs sooner and promised steps to prevent something like this from happening again. He arranged for Lily to receive counseling and offered her a transfer to a different classroom where she would feel safe and supported. It wasn't a perfect fix, but it showed that the school recognized the harm that had been done and wanted to make amends. For the first time in weeks, I saw Lily begin to relax again. She wasn't hiding in the corner of the room or avoiding her meals. She smiled at small things, like the little notes I continued to put in her lunchbox and the cookies I occasionally slipped in. When we packed her lunch the next morning, she actually laughed at something I wrote in her note, and her eyes sparkled with a light I hadn't seen for months. It was a small moment, but it meant the world. We started building routines that reminded her she was safe. We had quiet afternoons together, talking about her day, and I encouraged her to share any worries without fear. Slowly, the tension that had held her down began to lift. She started speaking up more in class, telling me about friends she made and what she learned. Every little step was a victory, and I celebrated each one silently, knowing how much courage it took for her to trust the world again. I also felt myself begin to heal. The anger and fear that had consumed me started to ease, replaced by a determination to support my daughter and protect her confidence. Knowing that justice was underway gave me strength, and watching Lily reclaim her joy reminded me why I had fought so hard. For months, the memory of those lunches and the humiliation they caused had haunted us. Now, with Mrs. Donovan suspended and Lily finally feeling safe, we could begin to move forward. Packing her lunch again became a symbol of normalcy, love, and resilience. Each day, as I watched her smile and carry her lunch to school without fear, I felt a sense of relief and pride. My daughter was healing, and so was our life together. A few weeks later, I received confirmation that Mrs. Donovan had been permanently removed from the school district. It was the final decision after the investigation, and it felt like a long overdue closure. Knowing that she would no longer have the power to hurt children gave me a deep sense of relief. The system had finally taken the right step, and the threat she posed to Lily and other students was gone for good. In the days that followed, several parents reached out to me. They thanked me for speaking up, for refusing to stay silent when their children were being affected too. Some said they had been too afraid to come forward, worried about causing trouble, but seeing that I was willing to fight gave them courage. Their appreciation meant a lot, but it also reminded me that standing up wasn't just about my daughter, it was about protecting every child in that classroom. But the true victory wasn't in the school's decision or the public apologies. The real revenge, the deepest satisfaction, came in seeing Lily slowly regain her confidence. She started to walk a little taller, speak a little louder, and smile more freely. The little sparkle in her eyes, once dimmed by fear, was back. She played with her friends again without hesitation and even laughed about small school moments she had missed out on before. Every day, she reclaimed a piece of herself that Mrs. Donovan had tried so hard to crush, and that made every struggle I had endured worth it. I made sure to remind Lily that her voice mattered. We celebrated her small victories together, raising her hand in class, telling me about her day without hesitation, or packing her lunch with excitement. Each of these moments became a symbol of resilience and triumph over fear. Watching her reclaim her joy was more satisfying than any formal punishment or apology could ever be. Looking back, I realized that the journey had taught me something important. The anger, the worry, and the sleepless nights were all part of a bigger lesson. Children's emotions are powerful indicators of their world, and ignoring even the quietest cry can allow harm to grow unnoticed. I had learned to trust my instincts, to listen carefully, and to act decisively when my child's well-being was at stake. Now, when I see Lily packing her lunch with a bright smile, I feel a sense of peace. I feel proud of her courage, proud of her resilience, and proud that I didn't let fear or doubt stop me from protecting her. Our life is slowly returning to normal, but the lessons stay with me. Sometimes the quietest cry reveals the loudest truth. Never ignore your child's tears, they might be the first step toward justice. Through this experience, I learned that standing up for your child is not just about protection, it's about restoring their spirit, their confidence, and their right to feel safe and valued. Lily's happiness is the ultimate proof that justice, when pursued with courage and care, can truly heal.